Alright, let's dive a little bit deeper into measures. Now, so far we calculate the total sales, and we have seen that the total sales measure exactly returns the same value as the total sales column. Now, what we could also be interested in, next to the total sales, is of course something like the total cost which occurred, or also maybe the total profit which we made, which would then be simply the difference between total sales and total cost. Or also margins which we have. For instance, what is the profit margin for each product? Or each location. We also have other tables, remember that. Or maybe the profit margin which each of our sales representatives created. Also interested for us, right? So in order to do this, we need to have a few additional measures inside. So a few additional insights. Now, we need to be a little bit careful here, because if you go back to the data view here, we know that under sales table, what we did in order to calculate the total sales, either by measure or also by column here, we had a quantity, which is this one here, and we also had the price. So we had the two relevant columns we have, or which we need in order to calculate the sales, both in the same table. However, for the cost, the total cost, this is different because we have an order ID here, and we have for each order ID a product, right? And for this product, we know that, okay, the quantity which has been sold is 1, like this one here. But what are the costs? Because the cost for the product, in this case PID 2077, is not here in this table so far. The relevant cost for each product is in another table. It is within the product table. If we select the product table, we see that there is the product ID, there is the product name, and the third column here would be the cost for each product. So our goal is to go in the sales table here. Then for each row entry in the sales table, we need to look up the quantity which has been sold, and then we need to jump based on the product ID we have here. We need to jump to the products table, select it, look up the product ID here, and then use the relevant cost here, this column, and multiply it with the quantity which is in the sales table. So we need to have basically columns from two different kinds of tables. So this makes this formula a little bit more difficult, at least from the beginning. So how can we do this? Well, the idea here is, let's actually do it with a measure. So we have a measure here. And if I right-click on my measures table and click new measure, remember what we did with the total sales number, right? We used an iterator function. And we again need an iterator function for our total cost. We can say total cost, and then I say is equal to, and now I'm going with a sum x, because I want to sum up the total cost, right? I need to calculate the cost for each order ID we had, and then I want to sum up all these costs to have my total cost number. So I'm using an iterator function again. I need to give it a table. My table was related to my sales table. That's also fine. And now as an expression, I can refer to the quantity, and I can see I have my sales table and a quantity. So I can select this here. But now, what happens if I try to multiply this with the cost? So if I search for cost here, you will see that there is no cost. You can see that the proposals which you get here are related functions which exist, like cosineers and so on, but there is no cost. So currently, in the measure itself, we cannot relate to the, in this case, product table and get the cost from the product table, the specific cost column. And relate is exactly the keyword, because there's an additional function in Power BI, which is a so-called related function. So if you, instead of using cost directly, you simply type in related here, related, then you can tap it and you see what this does. It returns a related value from another table. Now, what is related referring to? Well, remember what we did when we set up our model. We created a relationship between the sales table, which you currently have here, and our product table. And because we have set up this relationship in the model view, now we can use the related function to use a column from a related table. And this table could be a customer, because we also link customer to the sales table. Could be from the dates table, could be from any table where we have relations to with the sales table. But in our case, of course, we would like to have the cost. So type in cost here, and you can see that now Power BI is proposing here product cost. And this is exactly what you need. So we can press the tab on the keyboard, and then I can close this parenthesis here. This is my related function, and then of course I also need to close my sum x function. So I can also close the parenthesis from some x function. And here we go. This is what we need. So we multiply within the sales table, we look up the quantity for each of our sales entries, and then we need to look up the relevant cost for the product which has been sold, and we can do this using the related function. And this related function here only works, let me actually press enter. So at first let's actually create the measure. We got the total cost measure here created. Now this related function again only works because if we take a look at our model view here, we have from the product table the relation to our sales table. And because this relation is in place, that is why we can use the related function and then calculate here our total cost. Using the cost column here from our product, multiply it by within the sales table the quantity for each product ID. Okay? So this is the formula. Total cost has been created. Of course, I can select it, go under, in this case, the measure tools here, and then I also like to see this as a dollar symbol, so I can click this currency symbol here, and now it's also formatted correctly. And now if I go in here on my table, I can simply tick now total cost, and then I would also see the total cost here for each product in total which has been sold, right? And you can see exactly it's calculated in total, the number here, as well as for each, in this case, product name, because we here currently slice by product name, and for each product name we got exactly the correct number of total cost. And this only works because you set up the relationship. That is why it's so crucial to have this model structure exactly the right way set up, because then you can build on this model structure. Okay? So please invest the time first simply to set up your model exactly the way you need it. Make sure, as best practice, to have one-to-many relationships to your facts table, which is the sales table in our case. And then if you set up this model correctly, exactly the same structure you need it, then you can start creating your measures and do your visualizations in Power BI. Okay? Now, this is it for the total cost. And now, in order to calculate the total profit, this becomes really easy. Because as soon as you have created the measures, like in this case, total sales as total cost, you can use them directly. So there is no need now to refer anymore to the columns directly. We can do referring to the measures. So I right-click on the measures table here and say new measure. And this new measure will be simply the difference between the total sales and total cost. So for the total profit is equal to, I can simply say total. And you can see that you can refer to measures here. So I say I'd like to have my difference between total sales, and I simply subtract here the total cost. And you can see by default the measures are in a purple color in here. So now if you press enter, you're done, and you can see you don't get any issues here, no errors. And now if you select it first, go under measures and also make sure that this is a dollar symbol here. So let's say we sell our products in US dollars. And then if I click on the table one more time and also add my total profit in here, I can see that now I also have the total profit here for all my products calculated. So the difference between 432,000, sorry, and so on, and this 263,000 is exactly this number in here. Okay? So that's how you can calculate now the total profit. And the same is true, by the way, for the profit margin. So let's actually calculate this field as well. So let's right-click on my measures table here and say new measure, just to practice it one more time. And also let's calculate the profit margin. Let's say the profit margin, so profit margin is equal to, and now I simply say I want to divide my total profit, which is now also available, divided by the total sales, right? Like that. And you can simply calculate here the margin like this. However, there is one additional functionality which I like to add here, which is so-called divide function. Because you get exactly what you want doing it this way. However, if your total sales number, so actually your denominator, if this is 0, then you might get in the future a division by 0 error, right? And this is something you don't want, because normally you can't divide by 0. And in order to avoid this, to don't get any issues here, you can wrap this here instead in another function, which is so-called divide function. So this divide function here, as it tells you here, safe divide function with ability to handle divide by 0 case. So as a best practice, you can use this divide function here. You to type in the numerator as our total profit, here we go. And then you type in the denominator, which will be total sales. And then you can also specify if you want an alternate result. So just in case here you get an error, then you can specify here not specified or anything like that. So you can, for instance, type in here not available or anything like that could be done. if you want to do that. In my case, it doesn't matter, so I simply leave it blank. You can also see it's here in brackets, and whenever you have fields in brackets in a function, that simply means they are optional. You don't require to put them inside. You can do it, but you don't need to do it. So even if I leave this empty and simply close the parenthesis, I already save or ensure that I don't get any divide by zero errors. So that is why this divide function can be helpful for you. So if you press enter, then the measure gets created, and there's the profit margin. And of course, I'd like to have my profit margin, if I select it as a percentage number, that's why I select it here, and I go to as a format as a percentage here. And by the way, one more thing I'd like to show you. Remember when we talked about the model view here? Let's actually first select the table and add the profit margin to the table. Currently, this is not formatted, right? It's a percentage number, but it's not formatted correctly. So you can either select the measure here and go on the measure tools and say you'd like to format this as a percentage number, or the other way around would be if you go to the model view here, you see that there's an additional table which is currently hidden. Just make sure that you hide this property window, maybe for a short time, and there's our measures table. Remember, we have created this measures table in our model, and this measures table here, currently, let's actually make this maybe a little bigger here so you can see our measures. This measures table is not related to any other kind of tables. And this, of course, is true. The measures table, if you create it, is never related to any other kind of tables, because it only contains here, it's like a storage for all our measures. The measures itself are based on fields from the other tables, so the other tables are connected. But the measure table itself is simply only a table with no connections. That's totally fine. But for this table here, you can drag it wherever and place it wherever you want. You can also select, remember, you can select fields, and then if you open up the property window again, there's also an option to format this correctly. Of course, I need to first select the profit margin to have the correct measure, be aware of that. But then you can simply go here under percentage format, you can turn this on. So this would be the other option. And then if you go back to the report here, now you can see I got also my numbers here correctly formatted, right? So let me actually untick this one here. And I can see that here all my measures in my table here. So the last column, let's actually select maybe the measures table just to get rid of the header. And you can see that the profit margin here is also formatted now correctly as percentage numbers in here, right? So that would also be an option. So either select the measure here in the report view and then go to the formatting options under the measure tools icon. So my measures here, if I go to profit margin here and can select this one here, or you can also do it here within the model view. And the main advantage of the model view is that you can bulk formatting measures. Because what you could do here, for instance, I could select my total sales and then up to my total cost. So all of three. I hold my shift key to select all of them. And then here you can specify a format. And this means that you're bulk formatting measures. So if you have created a lot of measures, but you have not formatted them yet, you can do this in bulk here if you want to do that. Okay, that's why this can be helpful as well. So that's it actually for this video. Now we have learned how we can create additional measures. Be aware that when we're referring to columns which are not directly in the same table, and we want to use any kind of iterator functions like we have done for the total cost here, then we need to make sure that when we want to refer to other columns using this related function. And this related function then, if we wrap the specific column we want in this function, we can then use all the columns with tables or from dimension tables, which are related to our fact table, the quantity. Here the sales table. Okay, so that's it actually for this video. Hopefully that was helpful. Hopefully you were able to follow along, and hopefully you followed along. And always, thanks a lot for watching, and I can't wait to see you in the next video. Until then, best guys.